All right. So welcome everyone. Today we are talking about Buddha nature, which is kind of like the heart of the Mahayana tradition, also a very important concept in the Vajrayana tradition. And in the early sutras even, not using that term because the term evolves later, but in the early sutras, Buddha Shakyamuni, he also indicated that it was a really essential part, this understanding of what Buddha nature is, to achieving enlightenment. So before we start, we'll just do a really brief setting of intention. So basically, just spend a few seconds setting our intention in terms of why we're here, which is to benefit ourselves equally with all other sentient beings, to achieve realization for the sake of all sentient beings. Okay. Okay, so we'll start with the beginning, I think. So Shakyamuni Buddha, whose birth name was Siddhartha Gautama, he achieved enlightenment through a very simple method. And that method was shamatha vipassana, so two forms of meditation practiced consecutively and then in union. So when we say Shakyamuni Buddha achieved enlightenment, what that means is that he recognized his own true nature. So through the practices of meditation, shamatha or calm abiding and vipassana or insight meditation, he recognized his own nature. He recognized at the same time the ultimate or absolute nature of all things, because they are the same. Our true nature and the ultimate nature of all things are the same. We have different words for them, but the difference in sort of language is just for convenience sake, so that we can talk about things. But ultimately, they're the same thing. Our true nature and the ultimate nature of all are the same thing. So, when Siddhartha Gautama sat down on the final day for his enlightenment, he had done years of meditation beforehand up to that point. He had tried lots of different things, and he cast away those things that didn't work or that weren't working. And he refined the method down to a fairly simple approach, which has three kind of components: the meditative practice, the ethical conduct, and also there's lots of different words for this. I'm trying to use a sort of familiar Englishy word, the wisdom aspect, the knowledge aspect, which thousands of years later, we now sort of talk about that in terms of view, meditation, and conduct. So they all support each other, these things, in recognizing our true nature, the Buddha nature. And they support each other because they all come from the source, from the Buddha nature itself. So the path, or meditation, is a set of methods or techniques that comes from wisdom mind. So it comes from a realized being. And comes from a realized being as an act of kindness. So as a way of leading others to realizing their true nature and realizing the ultimate nature of everything so they can be free. So when we talk about the path or meditation, whatever it happens to be, we often call it skillful means because it's a skillful method to become free. And one of those methods obviously is kindness or compassion. And when we're talking about the view or the knowledge aspect or the wisdom aspect of this, it's essentially what the universe is, what reality is, and what we are. But it's just an indication, because what reality is, what the universe is, and what we are can't be described in language. It can't be nailed down. It cannot be simplified and reduced to conceptual ideas. So, and then the ethical conduct, obviously, that arises out of the realization of enlightenment, which has only one expression, which is kindness, compassion. But the one that is, but again, true compassion, true kindness, they're not really things that you can really get a handle on from this position, from the position of a being who is still mired in the delusion of self and other, here and there, then and now, up and down, good and bad, all of these things. They trap us into a kind of a position from which it's impossible to really understand what true compassion is. And that word itself does not do justice to the word in Tibetan in Buddhism is karuna. That word compassion does not cover it. It does. It's a hint. It's a hint about what that is. So the reason I'm talking about these things that don't seem to be directly related to Buddha nature is because they're an outflowing of Buddha nature, or Buddhahood, actually, the realization of the Buddha nature. So when we talk about the Buddha nature, we see evidence of it everywhere on the path. The methods themselves arise from the enlightened mind. The philosophy, which gives us a mental picture, but nothing more, of what reality is, of what we really are. They come from the enlightened mind too, but they're skillful means. They're not a direct picture or expression of what can't be expressed. And ethical conduct, again, it's not that there are these things that absolutely are good and must be done. It's that these things reflect the enlightened nature as close as possible. So ordinary kindness, ordinary compassion, these are good things, obviously, but they are a shadow of what the enlightened nature is. A very poor shadow. So this is why we show respect to these things, to the outer form of Buddhism, because they're expressions of enlightened nature, which is our own nature. There's no purpose for all of this except for to liberate us, sentient beings. They're all acts of kindness. Everything, even if you don't relate to it, it's all an act of kindness for some being, somewhere. Some being somewhere will relate to it and it will help them. So the Buddha in, I think it's called the Prubhasa Sutra, he talks about the importance of developing certainty around the Buddha nature. it's not called that in those sutras because, again, that's a term that evolves later. But he just talks about luminous awareness. So, or the luminous nature of mind. So, and he says in that sutra that if you don't accept with certainty that you have this potential for Buddhahood, that in your nature there is this luminosity, your nature is luminous, the mind is luminous, boundless. If you don't accept that, there's no possibility of enlightenment. So that's why these teachings on Buddha nature are really important. You hear a lot that without compassion, kindness, there's no enlightenment. This is true. Without, practicing, there's no enlightenment. This is true. But also what's true is without the view, this understanding of what we are and what the universe is. I don't like using that word universe, but anyway, you get my picture. You get what I mean. Without an understanding of that, there's no realization. These things are all essential. So we have to understand what our nature is, have a mental picture of it, because there's no way of really expressing it in language, in words, with concepts. We also need to act from that place, even though at the moment there are some hindrances to us acting from that place. So that place, remember, it's boundless openness, which has one kind of quality, which is of compassion, the quality of compassion. So we act from that place, even though we still have some reluctance to be selfless. Why? Because acting from that place helps us to become familiar with who we really are. And then we also need to have a path, a method of getting a direct experience of it. So the teachings on Buddha nature are the view, the knowledge side, the information side. The ethical conduct is the becoming familiar with who we really are in terms of how we relate to the outer world. And then the meditation practice is becoming familiar with who we really are in essence, in ourselves. I mean, even these words don't really mean much, ourselves. So the three things are really important. I'm just kind of wanting to stress that. So we're going to talk about Buddha nature itself, which is the philosophy, the view, the idea, right? But we can't divorce it from the other pure expressions of the Buddha nature or the Buddhahood, which is the ethical conduct and the path, the practice, the sitting down, the meditating. These things are a union. But there's a really fascinating relationship between these three things, is that you can emphasize one while still engaging with the others and it will work because they are in their nature one. But you can't do one and not the others and it work. It won't happen because there is much to untangle here in this dualistic entity that we call ourselves. And we need to approach that disentangling from every angle. So we're just going to talk about the one thing today, but it has to be taken in the context of there is ethical conduct and there is practice, there's sitting down, there's meditating. So now, I think the first thing that we need to get a handle on is what Buddha nature is. And that is a question that can't be answered. Yay! So we can say what it is not. So it is not a thing. It is not a soul. It is not a part of the self. it is not something you can hold or have. It is not something you can make better. It's also not something you can diminish or damage or break. It is it's not a thing. It is existent yet non-existent at the same time. So these paradoxes are meant to help us get a sense of how vast it is. But in simple terms, it's the quality that our awareness has that enables enlightenment. And you could take that one step further and say that it is the enlightened nature of our natural awareness. So depending on how you say things, you know, you get very different impressions about what we're talking about when we talk about Buddha nature. But it isn't a thing. It is a quality that all beings are imbued with or endowed with. And that doesn't just mean human beings. It means all sentient beings. And if you take another step further, it also is the fabric of the universe itself, the nature of the universe itself. So it's important when we sort of focus on our own Buddha nature, that we don't do that in isolation, because that is a dangerous mistake. When we think about Buddha nature, we should always consider the equal nature of all beings, profoundly equal nature of all beings. So there's no hierarchy here. There's no sense that human beings are superior. In fact, we're like third on the rung. We're not that great. And there should be no idea here that a piggy or a cow or a cat or a puppy dog or a mosquito or a leech, a flea or a microbe, flesh-eating microbe even, is not equal to us, has not the same potential. Some things will need to change for those beings, for them to become enlightened. That's certainly true. But it doesn't mean that the fact that those outer conditions need to change, that we can treat them as less than us, because there's no separation. On one level, there's no separation. So to treat other beings as less than us is to treat ourselves as not quite complete. So when we think about Buddha nature, we always make sure that we understand it in the context of the interconnected nature of all beings. So, you know, there's a lot of, I don't want to sort of bag any kind of like particular tradition, but there's a lot of stuff in the New Age where they talk about, you know, soul ascension and all this sort of like stuff, which really places human beings on a much higher footing than other sentient beings, and also places the individual in a position of primacy rather than, you know, it places the individual as central rather than places everything as equal. So, you know, like the idea of a soul means that there's something there that's intrinsic and lasting. That's a delusion, because there's nothing intrinsic and lasting. Find something, bring it to me. That's intrinsic and lasting, and I'll give you $10 million. Like, absolutely, no doubt. You will not find such a thing. There is no such thing. In the universe, there's no such thing. So Buddha nature is not like some intrinsic, everlasting thing that we have inside us. It's a quality of our awareness. It's only a quality of our awareness because it's the nature of the whole universe itself, the reality itself. It's not about us at all. We share this quality with all other sentient beings and with all other things. So this is a way of guarding ourselves against narcissism. When we consider the Buddha nature, if we always remember that it doesn't make us special, it makes us equal. Now, those who are not treated as equal on an ordinary level, relative level, understand how important that is and how beautiful that is. Those of us with privilege who are treated, pretty well and kind of above others, we can miss how profoundly important that equalness is. To be equal is not a small thing, and it's not a step down from being superior. It's better. It's better. So that's the first proviso. The second proviso is related to that, which is about trying not to think of it as a thing. It is trying to understand that it is a quality imbued in everything that we can access, or that we not even access, because it's our nature, that we can rely on, and that will, and by its very nature, enable us to be enlightened, because it is enlightenment. It is the enlightened nature. So that's the second kind of proviso. Make sure we don't think of it as a thing that has to be found, held, etc. We don't need to do anything. That awareness is there. All we need to do is recognize it, sit with it. So the other thing is, it's quite difficult to conceptualize. And this is why there's lots of debates in Buddhism about what Buddha nature is, because it's quite difficult to conceptualize. And those debates are actually not about what it is. They're about what is the best way to describe the indescribable. And so, I don't buy into these debates because there's actually no point. All of these ways of describing it are fine. They're fine, but none of them are perfect. We need to experience our nature for ourselves. And then the only way to do that is the path, which is meditation, ethical conduct, and this philosophical view. And if, philosophical view, we can boil down to a very simple thing. All beings in their nature are the same as the Buddha. And when we say Buddha, we mean perfect. We mean indescribably compassionate, indescribably wise, all-seeing, all-knowing, all these kinds of big words that we can use. So the word, when we say all beings in their nature are the same as the Buddha, it's not a small compliment. It's a fairly intense, indescribable thing. And it's really important that although we need to make sure we never think about Buddha nature in the context of just us, whether that be as the individual or humans, that we always understand it means all beings. It's also important to understand that it's not a solid thing that we have, that can be separated out from other things because it permeates everything. It can't be polished or fixed up, and likewise can't be broken or damaged. So we have to understand this, but at the same time, if we don't trust in the Buddha nature, we cannot rest. So there is no rest while you doubt the perfect nature of all things. There is no rest. Once you intellectually accept all beings in the nature are the Buddha, there's an element of rest there. We have no more enemies. There's no one we're afraid of. There's no one we don't love. So there's a very beautiful state of rest there. Then, through practicing compassion and kindness and meditation, we come to a direct experience of that nature. And then, not only that is an indescribable experience. So, and that means total rest. So you can't get anywhere in your meditation practice while you doubt the perfect nature of beings and yourself. You can get a little way. You can get some calm. You can get some insight into the nature of reality. You might start to get things like impermanence, fluidity, interconnectedness, things like that. But the dualistic mind continues to churn until you accept all beings in their nature are the Buddha, including myself. Because it brings with it that idea, not just the equality thing, which is profound. I'm not trivializing that, that's very important. But the perfection, the sense of perfection, like to get this, to accept this, to understand this. There is contentment, because what needs to be fixed? What is perfect does not need to be fixed. It's fixed, It was never broken, actually. So that the rest that this intellectual understanding brings leads to a direct experience of it. While we doubt the perfection of all sentient beings, while we have some barrier between us and others, between humans and animals, between humans and microbes, while those barriers are there, the mind has its ground. The dualistic mind has its ground. What's that ground? The sense of separation, self and other, difference. While that ground is there, it just churns over. And that subtle sense of I'm here and you're there leads to all of the awful things, like hate, jealousy, anger, rage, envy, miserliness, did I say greed? Greed, all of the awful things. That's where that comes from, that subtle sense of I'm here, you're there, and neither of those two things are in any way complete. They're in a state of incompleteness. So if you're in a state of perfection, guess what? If you accept that perfection intellectually as a first step, there's no sense of wanting anything. What does a perfect being want? Nothing, except to benefit others. There's no sense of inhibition. What does a perfect being have to be afraid of? The list is 0. There is nothing to be afraid of. What does a perfect being, do? There's no need to chase anything. There's no need to get degrees. I have a couple of degrees. I've actually quite a bunch of degrees. So yeah, I'm a hypocrite. But, what does a perfect being want? Nothing. There's no need to chase. There's no need to do. There's no need to run around and pursue. There's no need to convince others that you're worthy. There's no need to prove yourself. All of this is gone. So the view that all beings in their nature are the same as the Buddha starts to unravel all that the feeling of inadequacy, which is a core part of what it means to believe in a separate self. Inadequacy, separation, isolation, not good, not enough. That's core to what that is. But if you accept all beings in their nature are perfect, there's no longer any not good enough. There's no longer anyone to be displeased with. There's no longer any reason to pursue anything. One actually rests. One can actually rest. And then a mind that rests is a mind that is still and quiet. And then guess what? The luminous nature becomes evident. It's always there. It's just obscured by all this nonsense, all this chasing about that we do. So we need to develop certainty about the perfect nature of all beings, including ourselves. We need to develop that certainty in the context of we're all equal, including, leeches, microbes, etc. I mean, if you can't go there, go step at a time. Start with humans if that's easy for you. All humans are equal. Start, and then you can go on to other mammals, puppy dogs, kitty cats, etc., dolphins, and then go from there to things like lizards and things that are more different from us. But once we have that intellectual understanding, the mind begins to rest, relax. Then the meditation will start to really work. So I kind of started out here talking about things that didn't seem related to our intrinsic nature, who we actually are. But they're all outflowings of that intrinsic nature, and they're all there to help us get there, to wake up, to come home. So these things are all important. The ethical conduct, the meditation practice, the view, the knowledge, the wisdom. So when we're talking about Buddha nature, we also need to understand that when we say it's not a thing, that implies emptiness. So emptiness is a whole big thing that takes quite a bit of conversation and quite a bit of reflection to get it. But the easiest way to get it is to understand, if you go looking for, like if I went looking for Pema in my body, where would I find it? Where would I find this thing called Pema, this person called Pema? You go through your body, it's not in your arms, fingers, toes, legs, etc. You keep looking, you get down to the cells, RNA, DNA. Where is Pema? Where is this Pema-ness? You won't find any Pema-ness anywhere. We are conglomerates. The word that we use is heaps, translates as heaps, piles, mounds, aggregates. So we're stuff that put together we call ourselves. But if you go looking for the essence of this Pema, you'll just find the things, the aggregates, the components, the parts. And the deeper you look at these components, the more and more open, fluid, dynamic it becomes. So you can sort of, when you hear the word emptiness, you can kind of think fluid, dynamic, changeable, open. Those can help get a sense of what emptiness means. And also if you think about, if you're looking for Pema, where is Pema? You get down to DNA and RNA and you go down, 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 and you get to molecules, and then you go down, 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 and then you get to, atoms, electrons, neutrons, And then you go down further and there's quarks, little quarks. The deeper you look, the more space there is. So, you know what I mean? So things seem very solid here, you know, but the deeper you go, the more kind of there is just space enlivened by energy. So, and you keep going and there's still no Pemaness, you know. So this is really kind of important when we're thinking about Buddha nature. We also need to get this idea of interconnection, fluidity, impermanent. These words all relate to the Buddha nature. It's if we think of it as a thing that's contained within a person, that's not it, and also that will hinder our progression, our meditation. So the exact phrase from the early sutra from the Buddha, I can't recall, but it was something like, luminous is the mind, monks, because he was talking to a group of monks. Luminous is the mind, monks. If you do not grasp the luminous nature of the mind, there is no enlightenment. It's paraphrasing. So, and when we think about luminosity, that's also a good word for thinking about emptiness, because you can't grasp luminosity. Light is not grabbable, holdable, you know? So that's why that light and luminosity are often used as metaphors for emptiness, because it can't be held. But also when we talk about emptiness, it's not a nothing. It's not a, emptiness is not a good word. I've said this many, many times. The translation from shunyata to emptiness is not good, because there is a sense of total potential in the word shunyata. Anything is possible. Everything is contained, and yet nothing can be grabbed or held down. So emptiness is not a good word. I don't know, like, it's a shame that we've got it, we're stuck with it actually, because everyone uses it. But anyway, so when we think about Buddha nature, try and think of these ideas: interconnection, you know, fluidity, permeability, all of these kinds of words that mean the opposite of concrete, fixed, solid, because that is not what the Buddha nature is. So the traditional metaphor for Buddha nature, you've probably all heard this before, is that of the sun. Again, luminous. You know, ancient Buddhists, they weren't aware of the kind of quite solid nature of the sun. To them, it was this, you know, ungrabbable, ungraspable luminosity. So that was why it became the metaphor. So let's pretend we don't know. The sun's actually quite heavy and big. So the traditional metaphor is, our nature is like the sun. The dualistic mind is, which is what? Thinking, feeling, sensing. So when I talked before about the heaps that constitute, that we fool ourselves into thinking as a person, sense perception is one of those aggregates. Perception, which filters the sense information. So, you know, anything that comes in through the eyes then filtered through perception or cognition. Same with the ear and the mouth, etc. And then those things, when that sense information is, you know, interpreted by a perception, and then that perception kind of forms into what we call the dualistic mind. So the dualistic mind is external. It is not intrinsic to our nature. It's triggered always by external things, and memories are external things. The dualistic mind itself is an external thing in a way. So, thoughts, feelings, sensations, these are all not intrinsic to our nature. Emotions, not intrinsic to our nature. They pass through. So those are the clouds in the traditional metaphor or analogy. Those are the clouds that obscure the sun. So while they're there, all that thinking, feeling, and sensing, we see only clouds. And we think that's what the sky is, these clouds, But if the clouds, dissipate, then the sun shines through. And so likewise, if we allow the dualistic mind to settle, to calm down, to become quiet, the luminous nature of mind shines through. And then we have a sense of not just what we really are, because there's no who, what we really are. We also have, at the same time, a sense of what the universe really is, what reality really is, because they're the same thing. So this is the thing. If you sit in meditation, and you can sit in meditation for hundreds of hours, but if you believe, in certain things, that meditation will hit a wall, because the meditation occurs at first in the dualistic mind, like it's the dualistic mind that does it. Dualistic mind chooses an object, dualistic mind sort of watches the object, and eventually dualistic mind settles, and then you realize that there's actually awareness there. So, but if you believe in certain things, there is a wall that you won't go beyond. And one of the things that is a problem is to believe in permanent, fixed, solid things. If you believe that, then you believe thoughts are permanent, fixed, and solid, that they're natural, that they're part of you, then they will continue, and they'll continue to be your focus. However, if we accept, right, and trust that our ultimate nature is the Buddha nature, which is the sun, not the clouds, it's this luminous awareness that is not all the thinking, feeling, and sensing, right? If we accept that and we have trust in it, then as all that stuff settles, there'll be little glimpses of pure non-dual awareness, little itty-bitty glimpses. And when that happens, because we've been told that's our true nature, we will know, this is it, And as soon as you say this is it, then the dualistic mind's pop back in and you got to start again. So, but without that understanding that all of this stuff that people believe is their self, their thinking, their thoughts, their feelings, their sensations, their identifications, their likes and dislikes, their roles that they play, all of that, if you continue to think that that's who you are and that that's solid and real, then those little glimpses, they will be very, very, very brief, and you will miss them. You will totally miss them. So this is why you need the view to understand what Buddha nature is, because if you don't understand that, when it manifests, it'll just be like a brief interlude between constant mind chatter, and you will miss it. We will miss it. So, there is a meditation you can do to help with this. So, generally speaking, shamatha is the method for settling the mind. And we have this view of the Buddha nature of what we really are. That's just simmering in the background. When we're sitting in meditation, we don't think, in my nature, I'm equal to the Buddha. It doesn't hurt to think that occasionally, but we're not necessarily thinking that. We're just sitting, but we have accepted, when we're not on the cushion, the truth of Buddha nature. It actually permeates the meditation. The meditation is deeper. So, and we're more likely to recognize our true nature if that happens, if we accept the truth of this. So then, but you can do these little meditations, like which I have done in the past and actually do find pleasant and what's the word? Easy. You know, I go sit in the sun sometimes. I don't do it much anymore, but I used to do it a fair bit. Just go sit in the sun, eyes closed, you know, the light's shining on me, and I just understand. I kind of like imagine, these are not good words, but just kind of with the idea that that's the Buddha nature shining through, you know, and so that you feel it. And then you can do a kind of a visualization. So once you've done that a bit, sit in the sun, get a bit of sun on you, feel the warmth, understand how that feels in your body, rest in that warmth. Then you can do this meditation where you kind of visualize a cloudy sky. You're just sort of sitting, and then you just, as you sit, the clouds sort of slowly dissipate and part, and then the sun comes through, and you kind of imagine the warmth hitting you, you know, and that's your true nature, the warmth of your true nature. So that is a meditation that is quite commonly done to get a sense of, you know, the thoughts and emotions. When they clear, there's the luminous nature of mind. So you can do that. You can also do Guru Yoga, which is a tantric or Vajrayana practice for recognizing the true nature of mind. It's a very effective method, but it is part of the tantric system. So if you're not feeling tantric, then you can just sit in meditation, understand the nature of all beings and yourself. So there's lots of words for this Buddha nature, but they're not necessarily interchangeable. They all point to different aspects. So there's Tathagata Garbha is a traditional main one, which means Tathagata essentially means Buddha, you know, and so it literally translates as womb of Buddha, womb of the Buddha, Tathagata Garbha, which means, you know, and a womb is not the thing being pointed at, you know, like it's not, so it's pointing to the possibility, the potential for the arising of a Buddha. Another one is Sugata Garbha, another one, and lots of different words in different languages, obviously. But in Mahayana and in Vajrayana, they often say that the awakened mind, they use the word bodhicitta for the awakened mind. Bodhi meaning awake, chitta meaning mind. But often, weirdly, bodhicitta gets translated as compassion, which is a mistake, a big mistake that many are making. And I can't quite comprehend how pervasive this mistake is. But bodhicitta does not mean compassion. It means the awakened mind. What is the awakened mind? This is where the mistake comes in. The awakened mind is one, the union or the co-emergent wisdom of emptiness and the manifestation of boundless compassion. So that's where the error comes in. Because you can't talk about the awakened mind without compassion, but they are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. It trivializes the word bodhicitta to translate it as compassion or to say it means compassion. Not at all. It means a mind, the awakened mind, that has co-emergent wisdom of emptiness and boundless compassion. Co-emergent. They're one. So, you know, so bodhicitta in Vajrayana and Tantra, and particularly in Dzogchen actually, is often used as a kind of a code word for the Buddha nature, because it's the awakened mind, you know. So you get lots of kind of like, you get lots of subtle nuances around what the Buddha nature is when you look at the different words people use for it. So that, you know, obviously they use bodhicitta for it, which has a sense of compassion, has a sense of wisdom of emptiness. They use Tathagata Garbha, which means, you know, the potential for Buddhahood. They use the word emptiness even. Shunyata is often, you know, they often will say that Buddha nature is nothing other than emptiness. Often, sometimes the word emptiness is described as wisdom. So all of these sort of things, these different ways of talking about it, they give you a more nuanced picture of what it is, because it's not really graspable in simple terms. But the way to get a direct experience of it, and why would we want that? Well, because we're deluded and suffering. So we want to not be deluded and suffering. But more importantly, we want to be able to help others to be free of delusion and suffering. So that's why. That's why we give a damn about any of this. So to get there, to have a direct experience of one's nature, you need to meditate. You need to sit in meditation, shamatha, then vipassana, or insight meditation. You need to understand the view. You don't need to have like a PhD in Buddhist philosophy. You just need basics, you know, which is all beings in the nature of the Buddha, all equally. It's not a thing. It's quality of awareness. It can't be made better and it can't be broken. So doing good deeds won't help you recognize it. Likewise, doing bad deeds won't cut it off completely. But having said that, you only do negative things or harmful things because your mind is mired in dualistic patterns. So that is an obstacle. So it's a little bit contradictory. So even though doing good deeds won't reveal it for you, doing negative ones will definitely obscure it. So therefore, live ethically. So you only need this basic idea in order to sit in meditation and find your way. And I think we're at 3 o'clock. I think we might have some questions or pause for a break or something. We'll pause for maybe a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and do questions. All right, how's that sound? Okay. Okay, so before we go to questions, I'll just cover something. So this idea of our Buddha nature doesn't need to be something we dwell on in an uptight, striving kind of way, because although we need to accept it in order to become enlightened, it's essential. There's no way of becoming, I've said this before, just before actually, there's no way of becoming enlightened unless we accept our Buddha nature. There's a couple of reasons why. Number one, the mind never rests until we accept this. Number two, if we don't accept our Buddha nature, which implies this emptiness aspect, fluid, dynamic, changeable, interconnected, we'll always feel like we can't change. So the traditional analogy for this is we don't believe that the shirt is washable, the shirt being the mind. We believe that it's always dirty. It can't be washed, you know. But this is not true. The shirt can be washed. The mind can change. So if we don't accept the Buddha nature, then we the default position is our mind is as it is. It can't change. We will never change. The enlightenment is not possible. So that undermines us, obviously. Now, in order to come to this acceptance, to accept and trust in our Buddha nature, we need to ponder it occasionally. So I think weekly is a good idea to take time, 10 to 20 minutes, to think about the analogy of the sun and the clouds, about, you know, the fact that if you've got some meditation experience, it's easier because you've had experiences of, you know, non-thought, no sensations, no emotions. You've had experiences of stillness. So you can go, oh, in the absence of thought, in the absence of emotions, in the absence of sensations, there's still something. And that something, depending on how much meditation experience you've had, that something is vast, has quality of like unity or oneness. So that helps. But in the meantime, until you have those kinds of meditative experiences or abilities or skill, whatever you want to call it, You just need to kind of like trust that your nature is the same as the Buddha's and that it's perfect as it is. And one of the ways to do that without striving, because you don't want to do any kind of chasing thing. I really have to accept my Buddha nature. I really have to believe in my Buddha nature. Ooh, if I don't, I won't be enlightened. We don't want that. So something that is useful is to put little reminders on paper, like literally something that says, in my nature, in all beings in their nature are the same as the Buddha, as am I, is a good one. All beings in their nature are the same as the Buddha, as am I. You just put that on the wall where you'll see it when you wake up, and likewise where you'll see it when you go to sleep. And also pop it maybe on the fridge, pop it next to your computer when you're at work, have a little thing somewhere, so that you see it all the time. All beings in the nature are the same as the Buddha, as am I. And then that takes the striving out of it. It's just something you see all the time. Yep. And it becomes a kind of a thought that regularly permeates your life. You can also do, when I was a little itty bitty trainee Buddhist, I painted my fingernails. It doesn't sound very Buddhist, but I painted my fingernails, and I would paint my thumbs a different color. So usually I would have, I don't know what colors, but different colors, but the thumbs were always blue, sky blue or a deep blue, depending on my mood. And that was a sign for me, a symbol of Buddha nature. So whenever I saw my blue thumbnails, I would go, oh, all beings in the nature are the same as the Buddha, as am I. And then I also used to do, where I was young, where I grew up, there was a lot of a particular kind of a plant. And so I assigned that plant that meaning. All beings in their nature are the Buddha, as am I. So whenever I saw that plant, I would think that. And then as I graduated, became a big boy, I got a tattoo on my hand that is a reminder of a number of things. So, and also more recently, I've been using the sky. So it's when I see the sky, wherever I am, when I see the sky, I think all beings in their nature are the same as the Buddha, as am I. So you can use these kind of reminders, and it takes a striving and chasing and pursuing and work out of it. So it's a really good idea, I think. Sometimes you can have a bit of jewelry that reminds you, a ring or a bracelet or something around your neck, something like that. You know, anything. It doesn't really matter. Just something that reminds, that says to you, remember, all beings in nature are the same as the Buddha, as am I. So, and then sort of try and get a sense of what this word Buddha means. It's not, if you could kind of imagine if all of the love, kindness, compassion, and wisdom in the universe could be put in one place. That's what that word Buddha means. But it means more than that, you know, but at the very least, you know, all the love and kindness and compassion and wisdom in the world or in the universe is in that word and in the being that carries that word. So it's really like a big compliment. It's not a small, it's like to say all beings in the nature are perfect, as am I, is, you know, kind of getting there, but there's more, and there's no English word that can say what it is. You know, this limitless compassion, endless kindness, all-seeing wisdom, you know, there's no English word for this. And the word we have is Buddha, or bodhicitta as well. So, you know, try and remember when we're saying this, or when you see it on the fridge or wherever, that word Buddha means a lot. It means a lot. So every little ant and every little bird, you know, they carry this profound sacredness, I suppose. It's not a great word, but they embody this perfection, you know, so, and we do too. So it's not a small statement. Get your sense, try and get a sense of the like bigness of it, kind of bigness of it. Okay, questions? I think you guys can unmute yourselves. Hopefully you can. Yeah, I think you can. So you have questions, just maybe pop your little handsies up if you know how to pop your handsies up. Do that. Okay, Evelyn, go ahead.
Was I still muted? What? No, now can you hear me? Now I can't hear anything.
Yeah, I can hear you now, and you should be able to hear me now too. Go ahead, Evelyn. Evelyn is talking away, but we can't hear her. Evelyn, you're muted again.
Hello? Am I hearing?
Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you.
Okay. My question is, okay, if everything is all this sacredness and oneness and every microbe, etc., what about when I give my cat his worming medicine or his flea medicine, or what about when I take antibiotics, or what about the COVID vaccine, and what about things, yeah, like, I mean, microbes and animals that try and kill us? I mean, we end up killing them to survive. I'm confused.
Yeah, that's a good question. No, that is a good question. So, hang on a minute. So, the very, very strict traditional Buddhist position on these things, and the Jains also share this idea, would be to not use anything that kills any other entity. However, the sense of what a sentient being is when you get down to small beings, gets clouded. So to be sentient, they need to be self-aware. And at the moment, the science is saying that, so when I was talking about microbes, I wasn't talking about bacteria, because the science says bacteria are not self-aware and neither are viruses. So for Buddhists, we've always called those things bacteria and viruses under certain, they give them certain sort of labels, but they're not sentient. Now, the weird thing is there's a point where small single cell organisms become sentient and they behave sentiently, you know, so they're self-aware. So at the moment, Buddhism and science is in agreement that bacteria and viruses are not sentient. Whether or not that will continue, we don't know, you know, but at the moment, the consensus is that bacteria and viruses are not sentient. Worms, however, are sentient. So there is a thing there, isn't there? So my partner and I do not worm our cats unless we have to, like unless they're imperiled, you know? So you keep them on a diet that keeps things in balance. So we did, though, have to, when we got Coltrane, when he was a teeny weeny itty bitty baby, he was infested with fleas and he had really bad worms, because they usually go together, fleas and worms. So we did at that point, because his life was in danger, we did have to worm him and we had to comb the fleas off. But most of the Buddhists I know comb the fleas off and then transport them to another location. But our response to that is we keep our cats inside so they can't get fleas. We've lived here for 1.5 years. Our cats don't have fleas. We lived in the previous house for 4 years, never fleed them. Cats don't have fleas because we keep them inside. So there are things you can do to mitigate this stuff. But the other thing is, it's an individual choice about, you know, where your ethics lands. And so, like, a friend of mine, like, she literally will pick off, because she lets her cats outside. You know, she could save herself a lot of work by just keeping them in. She picks off all the fleas, puts them in a little glass jar, carries a glass jar when she goes for a drive to work to a paddock and lets them all out there. So, you know, so there are ways of, and, you know, Jains, really strict Jains will have a soft broom and they will sweep ahead of them so they don't step on insects. So there's, you know, so everyone's ethics has to find a place that can feel comfortable. There's no judgment. So, you know, if you worm your cat, if you flea your cat, then you just need to be aware that there are sentient beings here who are being impacted. I'm not saying don't, but I'm saying just be aware of it and find where you're comfortable. So for us, we don't worm or flea, but we have to keep them inside as a result. We have to kind of manage their diet as a result, you know, and yet, you know, and still, if their lives were endangered, we would have to weigh it up. You have to weigh it up, you know. So that's the thing, that's the position. I think, you know, I have Buddhist friends who say, oh, worms aren't sentient because you can cut them in half and both half. I'm like, who's going around cutting worms in half? But you can cut them in half and each half will survive, you know. So I'm like, I'm not sure if I buy that. So they would say that, you know, even some worms, like little pinworms or whatever, are not sentient. But I am not across the science enough to know. So I'm just careful. So we keep our animals indoors. We have not had to flea them in years and years and years and years. Like we don't, I'm not presenting this as the ideal, you know, obviously everyone has to find their own place, but, you know, we don't kill cockroaches or anything like that. So if the owners want to spray for insects, we resist and resist and resist and resist as long as we can. And then eventually, you know, they'll go, well, we have to do it. And we have to just let them, you know, because we don't own the property that we live on. So, you know, but we do push back anytime the landlord wants to spray for anything or anything like that. So you do what you can, but you also have to figure out for yourself what you think, you know, because Buddhism is not a set of truths. It's a set of methods to help you free yourself, you know. So any Buddhist that sort of says, oh, you know, bacteria are absolutely sentient, I'm not sure. I think that Buddhist might be, you know, telling a little white lie, because the science says they're not, and Buddhism says they're not. So, you know, there's a list of types of beings that are sentient in the Dharma, and bacteria and viruses are not included in that list. So I accept that, and I accept what the science says. But fleas and worms, this is something that we've had to figure out how to have pets and not kill them. Yeah. So it is a tricky thing, and certainly no Buddhist would ever say, don't get vaccinated against viruses, don't take antibiotics, because technically they're not sentient. Ondine, go ahead.
I was just wondering about transporting fleas to another place. And this might sound judgmental, but I was wondering, isn't that just transporting the problem that you have and giving it to some other person or place?
Well,
like it seems like kind of avoidance in a way.
It depends if you think that flea is a problem.
Well, fleas would be a problem in a place where there's no fleas, and now there's suddenly fleas, and an animal comes through and the fleas jump onto the animal. Now that animal has a problem.
I think there's fleas everywhere. I don't think there's a place in the world where there's no fleas. There's fleas everywhere. So, I mean, I don't do that myself because also like there's the driving part. So you're killing bugs when you drive, and it seems contradictory to like take 10 fleas to somewhere, you know, and kill 200 moths on the way. You know, like, so that's what I mean. You need to find your own position with this stuff. So if you feel like comfortable fleeing your cat, that's no one's going to judge you. No Buddhist is going to judge you. If a Buddhist judges you, they're not a Buddhist. They are not doing their primary job, which is to be open-hearted. You know, judgment is not open-hearted. So I'm just telling you what we do. I don't judge what other people do. You know, I have my own, I almost sound terrible. Some of my best friends kill fleas. But my family all have pets. They all worm their pets. They all flea their pets. I don't like tell my sister she can't come to my house because she's an evil serial killer. You know, I don't do that. You have to come to a kind of place where you're okay with what you're doing. You know, and no Buddhist of any actual practice would ever judge how other people's ethics land. You know, there are some things that are clearly a problem that we all stand against. Racism, sexism, homophobia, killing of humans, killing of mammals. Generally, we stand against that. When it gets down to the level of insects and worms and things, everyone has to find it. Everyone kind of finds their own place, you know. And I mean, I know a Buddhist who has a bug zapper, and I'm, you know, constantly telling them to turn it off. But I haven't disowned that person, and that person's, you know, that person prays for the bugs and thinks that's okay, you know, and I'm not judging that.
Well, you know, the reason I asked that was I did have an experience once. My home is flea-free and always has been, with the exception of one time when a person was coming to visit me with her pet dog. And I asked her if her dog was flea treated and if she wouldn't mind not bringing her dog if her dog had fleas. She decided to bring her dog anyway, and her dog was riddled with fleas. And then I had this flea problem for quite a while afterwards. It's gone again now. But
yeah. So that's an example of, you know, how complicated ethics is, you know. So clearly you don't want to cause someone else to have to kill fleas, clearly, you know. So that's why I mean, and also, like, look, anyway, and there are now things, my vet friend tells me, that don't kill the fleas. They actually just interrupt their life cycle. So they just die naturally and they don't lay eggs. So there are things that you can do, like if you want to keep fleas off your pet. Say again?
That's still killing them. Really?
Well, they just die naturally. You're not killing them.
Yeah, but they don't. That you interrupt their life cycle. That means they now have a death cycle. They have no chance
they don't reproduce. Yeah, but reproduction is not a good thing. Like this Western idea that reproduction is a good thing always. Buddhists don't believe that.
Anyway, look, I don't mind if fleas don't reproduce, really.
No, but reproduction is a problem. Like, it's a problem. It keeps beings trapped. It traps, the being born is trapped.
I see. So the aim is not to be reborn ever?
Yes. The aim, and if you're unenlightened, there's no purpose to be reborn. If you're enlightened, you choose to be reborn to benefit those who remain. Okay. So the goal, the early Buddhist position, because they knew how hard enlightenment is, was the goal is to not be reborn, because rebirth is a prison. So, you know, like there's a lot of stuff here. Like, so it's not just about, so to prevent a flea from being fertile is not cruelty to the flea. How is that cruel to the flea? It doesn't reproduce, which means there are fewer beings trapped. So, and those beings, you know what I mean? So like this idea that reproduction is good, it's a Western.
In the same sense, then all people should be on birth control so that people aren't being reproduced. The whole race dies out, and then, like, it doesn't marry up, that idea.
The Buddha advocated celibacy.
So okay. But in that case also then people aren't reproduced, And if they haven't enlightened and they're not being reborn to be enlightened, how does that make sense?
Okay, so the idea is to become free from rebirth. That's the whole point. So
you can easily do that by birth control rather than Buddhism.
no, but then okay.
That's how I'm reading it.
Rebirth and birth are not the same thing. So rebirth is not the same as birth. So what we see, you know, here is not the only option. There are other ways of existence that don't involve being born here.
Oh, okay, I get it now. Yeah. All right.
But there's also this thing. So look, so if you look at the world, we can see that reproduction, right, should be treated as a weapon because overpopulation is a serious problem that leads to millions of deaths every year. It's destroying the planet. So reproduction is not a good at all. So
But is that really true? Sorry to be so contrary, but there are millions of people in the world, and people say the world's overpopulated, which may be true, but they're not dying of starvation because there's too many people. They're dying of starvation because resources aren't shared.
well, I think there's a point where there's no way of sharing the resources around enough so that everyone survives. And I think we passed that point a long time ago. So there's a, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a particular figure.
Like the tipping point.
Yeah, and that tipping point we passed a long, long time ago. So even if we were to evenly distribute all of the world's resources to humans, right, we wouldn't save all humans. But we're forgetting something here, which is that human beings are not the only beings here. And to use up all the resources to feed the people, humans, takes resources away from other beings. So our constant growth, our population growth, has led to innumerable extinctions of other kinds of beings.
Yes.
And
I would like to say
I totally get what you're saying.
Is in no way in risk of facing extinction. Not all of us need to breed. I think we can take that pressure off us now. We don't need to keep.
yeah.
So birth control is the answer.
It's a funny thing that I'm always interested to see which ideas become the thing when we're talking. You know, which thing is the thing on any given day. So, and I suppose that like this idea, like we're talking about the sacredness of beings, right? But then it seems to be contradictory to say, oh, we don't want more beings. It does, doesn't it? It seems contradictory to say that. So, but it's about balance. You know, we don't want, because we have a situation, particularly island nations have these situations where certain animals will overpopulate and then destroy other animals, and then they themselves starve to death. You know, when left unchecked, reproduction becomes a terrible thing. You know, so, and those of us who have the ability to choose whether to reproduce or not need to consider it carefully. You know, and the Buddha always advocated celibacy. Because, not just because, you know, there's so much suffering involved in human existence, but also because it frees you up to do other things. Like instead of using all of your energy and resources to care for children, you can care for your community, you can care for the environment, you can care for all these other things. So Buddhists have a predisposition to being wary of reproduction for reproduction's sake. Yeah, but not that it's a bad thing. It's just
So
that,
would you say then for the ideal of Indigenous peoples who are living in the environment responsibly, etc., should they not reproduce either? Like,
I'm not
talking about
I'm
an
not saying-
ideal sense.
So this is the other thing about Buddhism. We don't tell other people what to do. So I have no interest in telling other people what to do. None. Zero. No Buddhist ever wants to tell other people what to do.
It's probably very much in our nature to make more people.
That's the other thing. And so that's why the Buddha advocated celibacy, because it resolves the principal driver of that problem. Yeah, but however Indigenous people want to live, that's up to them. White guy living in Toowoomba is not going to tell them what to do, or you have any idea.
No, I don't need to tell them what to do. I just was wondering if they are living perfectly in sync with their environment. They're not overpopulated. They're actually part of the whole circle. They're not at the head of a hierarchic system. Then isn't that in itself like a Buddha nature?
But you're separating everybody. You're separating everyone out. And Buddhism doesn't separate everybody out. It doesn't separate humans from sentient beings. And it doesn't separate one group of humans from another group of humans.
I don't mean as a separate group. I mean as an idea.
Just as an example.
Yeah.
I think the Buddha proposed as the ideal, right? This is not about Indigenous people at all. The Buddha proposed as an ideal a community that was focused on the reduction of suffering and the increase of kindness. That's it. So whatever that looks like, and it can look like many things. So yes, it could look like a community living at one with nature, having some babies, but not too many babies, or alternatively, it could look like, a community living in a highly industrialized, highly technologically advanced location, but all of their technology, all of their industry is focused on reduction of suffering and the increase of kindness. So it doesn't really matter what it looks like, whether you're in the forest or in a city. It's the quality of what are people committed to. So, and all the Buddha was talking about in terms of reproduction is that when that's your driver, militaristic societies encourage reproduction in order to have warriors to fight wars. Cities encourage reproduction. Capitalist states encourage reproduction in order to have consumers to fund growth. So there are reasons why the baby bonus was a thing, because that drives the capitalist agenda. The Buddhist agenda is anti-capitalist, anti-military, and pro-compassion, pro-kindness. So it doesn't need, growth. Doesn't need it. So whatever that looks like, and I'm not saying there's a model that's ideal, whatever culture has compassion and kindness as its drivers, that's the Buddhist ideal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So I do understand what you're talking about in terms of shifting the problem because that is part of your ethics. You shouldn't shift your problem to someone else's house. Yeah.
This is just an example. I didn't mean, I'm judging that particular person. I just meant as an example.
And I think on a larger scale, that was a personal example, but on a larger scale, that's still a good example because if we were to shift, it's something that Australia is currently doing. We're shifting our responsibility around climate change off to poorer nations you know, off to other nations. We're doing very little, and that means that other nations have to do more. So we're kind of like exporting our problem. So you're absolutely right. That was an unethical thing to do, for that person to bring the fleas to your house, because it then puts you in a situation where you've got to make decisions about what I mean, I don't know if you did or not, but if it were me, like if someone came to my house with a dog who had fleas, the fleas got in the carpet, the fleas got in the cats, then for us, that would be a big thing, because then we're like, oh, how are we going to deal with this, you know?
Well, it was
You have to move.
because my dog was actually allergic to fleas, and he got very, very ill.
Yes, and there's the other thing, like the same with like any kind of situation where you shift your problem over to other people, where you don't consider others. That's what the Buddha wanted to eliminate. The shifting of the problem, not considering others, that's a problem. Yeah. You know, any other questions? I seem to have more buttons than I usually have.
No. I just want to say, every time you say empty mind, I think of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
The what?
Ghostbusters.
Oh, Ghostbusters. Yeah. Well, that's nice. That's not a bad thought. So why?
And he tried to think of the friendliest thing that would be like, you know, the easiest thing to deal with, because it's hard to empty your mind and think of nothing.
Yeah, because as soon as you say, think of nothing, thinking itself is something. So you have an issue there. All right. What's that guy called? The what?
The Stay Puft
later. The what?
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
I'm gonna write that down. Stay puffed.
I think it's PUFT.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Okay, so no more questions? If not, we'll wind up. Nope. Okay.
No, not now.
Okay. All right. Oh, so thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I'm home now, but it's all over.
And I enjoyed your trip to Chemist Warehouse there, Peter.
Chemist Warehouse. Yeah, I thought, I better just turn this off, because I don't know. Wasn't quite sure what I was going to expose everyone to.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
like, what's she purchasing?
I had to get a script. Oh, there's all sorts of things.